the Church of God Mission Academy, leading you from uncertainty to confidence, to give you freedom from man's opinions by following the golden rule. The Bible always interprets the Bible. With every lesson, Cogma offers a clear path to learn for yourself, to rightly divide the Word of God. The question: are you up for the journey? In this video titled, The Messiah Predicted to the Year, we trace the prophecy of Daniel's 70 weeks to the exact date, that Jesus was crucified. It leaves no room for error and certainly no gap period between the 69th and 70th week. When we allow the Bible to interpret itself, the timeline is crystal clear, so let us open up our Bibles and let the Bible speak for itself. Let's start with a really important idea. We're going to be looking at a prophecy that works less like a mysterious riddle and more like a precision clock. I'm talking about a countdown, one that was set in motion thousands of years ago, and one that was ticking down to a single verifiable and absolutely pivotal moment in the history of the world. You've probably felt this yourself. You open the scriptures, you turn to one of the prophetic books, and it just feels, well, cryptic. It can seem like you're trying to solve a puzzle, but half the pieces are missing, and the instructions are in a language you don't quite understand. It all feels so symbolic, so abstract. And if we're being honest, it can feel like pure guesswork. So many people just close the book and walk away thinking that these Old Testament prophecies are just impossible to pin down to anything real, anything you can actually test in history. And I get that. I completely understand that frustration. It leaves you wondering, is this all just a matter of interpretation? Is one person's guess really as good as another's? But what if I told you that tucked away in the scriptures, there's a prophecy that is completely different from all the others? I mean, radically different. What if there was one that wasn't about interpreting cryptic symbols at all, but was actually about doing maths? Imagine a prophecy that is, for all intents and purposes, a countdown clock, a timeline given with such startling mathematical precision that it counts down not to a general era, not just to a decade, but to a single specific year. This is a clock that was set in motion over 2.5 millennia ago with a clear start button, a precise duration, and an end date that we can actually look up and verify in our own history books. Now, this one verse, this is the heart of everything we're going to uncover together. It's from the book of Daniel, chapter 9. And I want you to look very, very closely at the details here. It gives us an incredibly specific starting event, a command, a decree, a word that goes out to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem. That's point A. Then it gives us an equally specific ending event, the arrival of a person called Messiah, the Prince. That's point B. And between these 2 points, it gives a precise length of time, 7 weeks and 62 weeks. This isn't vague language. This isn't poetry. This is a formula. It's a mathematical equation just waiting for us to solve it. And that leads us to the huge question we're going to tackle together today. Is it actually possible? Could this prophetic piece of writing, penned over 500 years before Jesus was even born, literally contain a mathematical timeline that pinpoints the exact time frame of his arrival, not as a lucky guess, not as a spiritual metaphor, but as a real, hard calculation that you and I can follow step by step? Is it possible that the answer to one of history's biggest questions has been sitting here right in plain sight all this time? Now, you might be thinking, okay, if it's so clear, why isn't this common knowledge? Why isn't everyone talking about this? Well, that's a fair question, and the reason is that getting to the answer means we have to carefully navigate some historical details that can be genuinely confusing. And this right here, this is exactly where most people get tangled up and give up. For instance, history tells us there were several decrees from Persian kings related to the Jews. So which command is the right one? How can we be absolutely sure we have the right starting gun for this prophecy? And then you've got this strange prophetic language of weeks. What on earth does a week mean in this context? On top of that, you're dealing with ancient Jewish calendars, which are different from ours, and you have to make the jump from BC to AD. It can feel really overwhelming. And it's so easy to just throw up your hands and assume the numbers won't actually add up. These are the exact hurdles we are going to clear today, one by one. And listen, it is so easy to get lost here. I want to be very clear about that. The moment we start talking about the regnal years of ancient Persian kings and calendar conversions, it's completely natural to feel your eyes start to glaze over. I really do get it. It feels incredibly complicated, like it's something only a professional historian or a seminary professor could ever hope to figure out. You might even be feeling a healthy dose of skepticism right now, wondering if we can really be certain about dates from that long ago. And you know what? That feeling is completely normal, and it's okay. But here is my promise to you. We are going to walk through this whole thing together. I'm not just going to drop the answer in your lap and expect you to believe me. That's not what this is about. I'm going to be your guide, and we are going to walk through the reasoning, one simple, logical step at a time. We're going to solve each little piece of this puzzle, and by the time we're done, you are going to see for yourself with your own eyes how perfectly it all fits together. You won't have to take my word for any of it because you will have seen the calculation for yourself. So here's our plan. This is the roadmap for our journey. First, and most importantly, we have to find the start date, the exact moment the prophetic countdown clock was started. Then we'll figure out the length of the countdown itself, what I'm calling the 483-year clock. After that, we get to do the maths together and see exactly where the timeline lands, marking the arrival of the Messiah. Then we'll look at the final piece of the prophecy, that last week, and see how it unfolds. And along the way, we're going to pause and correct a very, very common error that trips most people up. Finally, we'll put it all together and see the entire breathtaking timeline fulfilled. So let's begin with that first crucial step. So first things first. The single most important step in any countdown is knowing exactly when to start counting. If you get the starting point wrong by even 1 year, the entire calculation will be off. So the prophecy in Daniel gives us a very specific trigger event. The clock starts at the going out of a word to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem. Our first job then is to hunt through history and find that exact moment. The good news is that the scriptures don't leave us guessing about this. Over in the book of Ezra chapter 7, we find a detailed, almost legalistic account of this very command. We learn it was a decree given by a powerful Persian king named Artaxerxes I. This wasn't just a simple permission slip. He gave the priest Ezra full authority. He provided the resources from the royal treasury, and he gave the official backing of the Persian Empire to go and restore not just the buildings of Jerusalem, but its entire system of civil and religious governance. This is our historical anchor. We have the king's name, and we have the biblical record of his decree. So how do we get from a king's name to an exact year? The Bible is specific. It tells us this command was given in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes' reign. This is where we have to be really careful. A regnal year is just a year of a king's rule, but the way it was counted back then is a little different from our modern methods. The ancient Jewish people used a specific system for counting the reigns of foreign kings. They would mark the start of a king's new regnal year in the autumn. On their civil new year, a festival called Rosh Hashanah. Historical and astronomical records are very clear that Artaxerxes officially took the throne in late 465 BC. So his first full regnal year, according to that Jewish method of counting, would have begun in the autumn of 464 BC and concluded in the autumn of 463 BC. Now, let's just count it out together. Look at the table. If his first year ends in the autumn of 463 BC, then his second year ends in the autumn of 462, his third in 461, and so on. Let's follow it all the way down. His sixth year ends in the autumn of 458 BC. That means his seventh year, the year the command was given, ran from the autumn of 458 BC into the autumn of 457 BC. The decree itself, as recorded by Ezra, was issued during the calendar year that we now know as 457 BC. So here is our first major breakthrough. After carefully following both the historical records and the ancient method of counting, we can confidently and with great precision place the starting point of our prophecy, the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. The very event that started this great prophetic clock was given in the year 457 BC. This is our anchor date. I want you to please lock that date into your mind. 457 BC. Everything else we're about to do builds directly on this one foundational fact. All right, so we've secured our start date. Now we need to figure out the second piece of the puzzle, the duration. How long is this countdown supposed to run? The prophecy says the time from the command until Messiah, the prince, would be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. At first glance, that sounds like strange, almost code, like language. But it's actually just a mathematical expression that we need to translate. So let's look at this carefully. The prophecy breaks the total time into two distinct periods, a 7-week period and a 62-week period. For our current purpose, which is to find the total time until the Messiah shows up, we simply need to add them together. It's that straightforward. 7 plus 62 gives us a grand total of 69 weeks. That's the first part of our translation. The total countdown is 69 prophetic weeks long. But this brings us to the most important key we need to unlock this whole thing. What exactly is a prophetic week? The original Hebrew word used here is Shabuah, and it simply means a 7 or a unit of 7. It can mean a week of 7 days, and often does, but in the context of long-form symbolic prophecy, there's a well-established principle in Scripture where a day represents a year. This day for a year principle means that a prophetic week, or Shabuah, consistently refers to a period of 7 years. So when the prophecy says week, we should be thinking 7 years. Now that we know the code, the maths becomes incredibly simple. Watch this. We take the total number of prophetic weeks, which we know is 69. Then we multiply that by the number of actual years in each prophetic week, which is 7. So what is 69 times 7? It equals exactly 483. So the prophecy is giving us a countdown that is precisely 483 years long. Okay, this is the moment we've been building toward. We have our official start date, 457 BC. We have the exact duration of our countdown, 483 years. Now finally, we can put them together and do the calculation. We can find the exact year Daniel's prophecy was pointing to all along. This is where it gets truly exciting. Here are the two numbers we've worked so carefully to establish. We start the clock in the year 457 BC, and we need to let it run for 483 years. The maths here seems simple enough on the surface. We have a certain number of years in the BC era, 457 of them, and we need to subtract them from the total length of the prophecy to see how many years are left over to take us into the AD era. If you just do that simple subtraction on a calculator, 483 minus 457, the answer you get is 26. And so you might think, aha, the prophecy points to the year 26 AD. And honestly, many people stop right there. They get to that number, it seems pretty close to the time of Jesus, and they just assume that's the final answer. But if you stop here, you will miss the single most crucial detail of the entire calculation. So I need you to lean in and listen very closely for a moment. This right here, this is the single biggest mistake that people make when they try to calculate this timeline. They completely forget to account for a quirky little feature of the way our calendar works. They forget to ask a very simple but vital question. When you go from BC to AD, is there a year 0? And the answer is a definitive no. There is no such thing as year 0 in the transition from the BC to the AD calendar system. Think about it on a number line. The year that came before 1 AD was not year 0, it was 1 BC. The calendar clicks directly from December 31st, 1 BC, to January 1st, 1 AD. Because of this, when you do a simple subtraction that crosses that boundary, your maths will always be off by exactly 1 year. Our simple calculation didn't account for this missing year. So to correct for this historical fact, we simply have to add that 1 year back into our total. And when we make that one essential correction, what do we get? 26 plus 1 equals 27. The prophecy written in the 6th century BC points with mathematical laser precision to the year 27 AD. So what happened in history in 27 AD? Well, historical and biblical records align to show that in the autumn of that very year, Jesus, at about the age of 30, began his public ministry after being baptized by John the Baptist in the Jordan River to fulfill all righteousness, and he was set apart for his ministry when in symbolic form, Jesus the Most Holy was anointed on the banks of the Jordan River. This also revealed the true New Testament baptism. 27 AD was the exact year that Messiah the Prince was revealed to the nation of Israel. The countdown landed perfectly. It's absolutely stunning. But wait, the prophecy doesn't actually stop there. Remember, the total prophecy given to Daniel in chapter 9 was for 70 weeks, not just 69. We've accounted for the first 69 weeks, which is 483 years. But that means there is one final week, one final 7 period that we still need to examine. The timeline continues. So what happens during this final 70th week? The prophecy gives us another astonishingly specific detail. Look at this. It says that in the midst of the week, referring to this final 70th week, the Messiah will do something truly profound. He will cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Now, this is a direct reference to the animal sacrifice system of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, which was the absolute heart of their worship. The prophecy is telling us that the Messiah's work, happening right in the middle of that final 7-year period, would somehow bring that entire system to its ultimate fulfillment and its functional end. So let's break that down. What does in the midst of the week actually mean? Well, if a prophetic week is 7 years long, what is the middle of 7 years? It's 3.5 years. It's simple division. That final 7-year period is split right down the middle. There's a first half of 3.5 years and a second half of 3.5 years. And this great sacrifice ending event was prophesied to happen precisely halfway through that final week. Now we can do our final calculation. The 69th week ended, and therefore the 70th week began in the autumn of 27 AD with the baptism of Jesus. That's when his public ministry started. So let's take that date and add 3.5 years. Let's count forward. If you start in the autumn of 27 AD and count forward 3.5 years, where do you land? You land squarely in the spring of the year 31 AD. And what world-changing event happened in the spring of 31 AD? That was the Passover season. It's the exact time when Jesus Christ was crucified. His death on the cross, the ultimate sacrifice for all sin, is what caused the temple's sacrifice and oblation to cease in their meaning and their purpose forever. The prophecy was fulfilled not just to the year, but to the very season of the year. So let's just pause for a second and take a step back to look at the entire finished picture. We've walked through each individual component piece by piece very carefully. But now we get to see how this incredible divine clockwork all fits together into one seamless, perfect, and unbroken timeline. This is the moment of revelation where it all clicks into place. I want you to look very carefully at this timeline. It is simply breathtaking in its precision. The clock starts ticking in 457 BC with the decree from King Artaxerxes. It runs for exactly 483 years, landing us in the autumn of 27 AD, which we now know is the very year Jesus began his ministry. Then we see that exactly halfway through that final 7-year period, 3.5 years later, in the spring of 31 AD, the Messiah is cut off just as the prophecy stated at the crucifixion. Every single checkpoint on the timeline was met perfectly, exactly on schedule. Now, it's important to mention that many people today have been taught a different idea. They've been taught that there is a massive 2,000-year and counting gap of time that gets inserted between the 69th week and the 70th week of this prophecy. But as we've just seen by walking through the maths and history ourselves, The prophecy itself presents a continuous unbroken timeline of 70 weeks, or 490 years. The 70th week follows the 69th week just as naturally and immediately as Tuesday follows Monday. The evidence points to the entire prophecy being fulfilled continuously and completely in the life, ministry, and death of Jesus Christ. This is the point where we need to shift gears a little bit. We've gone from the what to the so what. We've done the maths. We've seen the historical dates line up perfectly. But what does this actually mean for you and for me sitting here today? What are the real implications if a prophecy written down more than 5 centuries before the events even happened could predict the timeline of the Messiah's arrival and death? Not vaguely, but down to the exact year. It really forces us to ask some very, very big questions about the nature of God and His Word. The real takeaway, the crucial point I want you to see, is this: the power of this prophecy isn't found in a mystical interpretation or a secret code. Its power is in its verifiability. This isn't like some vague Nostradamus prediction that could be twisted to mean a dozen different things. No, this is a mathematical formula. It has a clear starting date, a precise duration, and a pinpointed ending date that we can check against established secular history. It is a testable claim, and when we put it to the test, it holds up with stunning, jaw-dropping accuracy. Just think about what we've accomplished together in this short time. We took on a prophecy that feels confusing and honestly pretty intimidating to most people. But step by step, we broke it down into manageable pieces. We went into the history books and we found the precise start date, 457 BC. We translated the prophetic language to discover the exact length of the countdown, 483 years. We did the maths, and we were careful to correct for that tricky year 0 issue, and we landed exactly on 27 AD, the year of Jesus' baptism. And then we went even further, and we pinpointed his crucifixion in the spring of 31 AD, right in the middle of that final prophetic week. You followed every single step. You saw for yourself how it all works. If that's true, what would that change for you? You have seen how Daniel's 70-week prophecy has taken us right up to the crucifixion of Jesus on Wednesday, the 14th day of Nisan. In 31 AD, Daniel's prophecy concludes 3.5 years later at the stoning of Stephen in Acts chapter 6, representing the final rejection of Israel of their Messiah, Jesus Christ. Although many of you have been taught that there is a gap period between the 69th and 70th week, it is evident that this is not true. Daniel's prophecy perfectly fulfills the historic events leading to the crucifixion of Jesus and the final rejection of Israel in 34 AD. So I just want to leave you with this one final thought to reflect on. What if this one single prophecy is like a clue, a hint about the nature of the entire Bible? What if the scriptures are not just a collection of ancient moral stories and vague spiritual hopes? What if instead they are far more reliable, far more specific, and far more historically precise than you've ever been led to believe? Think and meditate on those questions until the next time.